Hey, Dr. B here, and let's take a look at a history of the atom. 2,000 years before Christ, some people suggested that atoms existed. There would be the point at which things would become no longer divisible. Democritus suggested this, and he used the term atomos for this. His evidence was nothing at all. At the same time, Aristotle suggested that atoms could exist in the form of either earth, air, fire, or water. We now understand these to be not really atoms, but the phases that atoms can exist in: solid, gas, plasma, liquid. In the Middle Ages, there was a lot of confusion. There was a focus on religion. But one scientist, Al-Ghazali, who was a natural philosopher, meaning that he too had no evidence, suggested that someday we can split the atom, and he wrote a book called The Chemistry of Happiness to support this. If you look at the book, it's largely religious in nature. Evidence finally showed up in the late 1700s when chemical instruments began to show up, most notably the two-pin balance. Lavoisier demonstrated that matter is indestructible and that if you combine substances, you will never change the masses of them. Dalton suggested that atoms combine in small whole numbers, meaning that there are bonds between them when they form, and that they are not necessarily of the same mass. And in fact, different elements have different masses. Thomson went a step further when he found that in fact there's something within the atom itself which he called the electron, or became known as the electron. And this is known as the plum pudding model. They exist, but nobody knows what they're doing. In a fairly unique experiment, Rutherford showed that there's a lot of empty space between atoms, huge amounts of it, and that may be where the electron exists, and therefore there is a separation between the electron and the rest of the atom, which became known as the nucleus. On top of all that, images began to appear in, say, about the 1970s or 80s, showing conclusively that atoms existed, and in fact where the electron clouds are began to appear in the 1990s with the work of Mikhailovsky and others, showing some detail about where the electrons are. This is a brief history of the atom.